In this video, we show you how we implemented over 5,700 DAX measures in QuickBooks for QuickBooks for our Power BI and Power Pivot examples. We provide several dozen Power BI PBIX workbooks to showcase our 35 QuickBooks data models with two purposes in mind. The first is to help the average user get started without having to know DAX. The second is to provide a methodology that is sound yet flexible enough for advanced users and developers. We've reached out to the best in the world, Russo, to create this Power BI and DAX methodology. So those of you who are familiar with his expertise will welcome what we have done. The QuickBooks data models contain dozens of measures that the Intuit Software Development Kit or third-party ODBC connectors do not have. And for those of you who may not know, the third-party ODBC connectors must also use the Intuit Software Development Kit and make things look like tables. Nobody gets a direct connection from Intuit. But QuickBooks cannot possibly contain all of the necessary measures that business owners use in their day-to-day dashboards. It is best to leave those to the individual application, and in this case, Power BI or Power Pivot. For those of you not familiar with DAX, it stands for Data Analysis Expressions, and it is a Microsoft calculation language first introduced in 2010 for Power Pivot. Proficiency with Excel functions and calculations doesn't mean that you will catch on to DAX immediately. There are so many nuances that it can make your head explode, which is why it requires a brain like that of Marco Russo to get correct. So rather than dig in the weeds, for which we have complete documentation, we're going to look at the categories of measures we have and then show you some examples. So let's dive in. Here is a QuickBooks sales data model for Power BI, which includes a majority of the types of measures included in QuickBooks. The front of each workbook gives you instructions for entering the proper credentials for the two DSNs we install for every QuickBooks implementation. The tabs contain starter examples which showcase how you can use QuickBooks and its measures and fields. Let's go to the table view. At the top of the table view in any data model is the folder containing all of the measures, and it will be in all caps. We organize the measures into buckets to make it easier to find what you need. So first we have the QuickBooks fact tables. These are calculated in QuickBooks for use in application, but cannot be used because they need to be contained in a formula. So the raw measures are not used and are hidden from view. Next are the base measures, and these are prefaced with a period. These take the fact fields from QuickBooks, which we have hidden, and we turn these into actual measures for Power BI. So in this instance, you can see that there's a simple sum formula. Next, we have something called intermediate measures. Intermediate measures are used in other measures, but not themselves used directly. You'll notice that they are prefaced with a DAX P and contained in a bracket. We have two types. The ones at the bottom here assess the today date assigned in the QuickBooks configuration tool. We have calculations for current month or today or this week, and they are based upon the today date that you enter in the QuickBooks configuration tool. Here is where you enter that information in the QuickBooks configuration tool. You can define the today date to be anything you want, and when you change it, everything else is automatically calculated, needing only a refresh inside of Power BI to be changed. The second type of intermediary calculation is something that's going to be inside of a pattern measure. Again, these are hidden. They start with DAX P. They're within brackets. You might notice that the end of these are quarter to date, month to date, year to date. So let's look at these particular calendar pattern measures. If you notice in one of the formulas, you'll see this intermediary formula listed there. This is based upon the methodology from the published writings of Marco Russo and his partner Alberto Ferrari. These allow two things. You can do cumulative graphing for year over year, and then you can do side-by-side column drill downs where you can start with year, drill down to quarter or month, etc. The sister measure to calendar pattern measures, which allow you to compare equal time buckets side by side, is something called a calendar specific measure. So let's look at some of those. And you can see that these are specific date buckets as opposed to the pattern measures, which were equal buckets. These are the most common measures used in the QUBE examples. And then next we have comparison measures, where you can subtract one specific calendar measure from another or show percentage comparisons. And then lastly in this group we have something called a single value measure. These are not patterns or calendar specific date ranges. So in this customer folder we see something called lifetime value, right? That's just a single value. The first sales transaction amount, the last sales transaction date. So now I want to show you some special things we have done for financial statements. This is a profit and loss flexible period data model for Power Pivot. The same data model is also available for Power BI. Whereas in our data models in the earlier QUBE iterations had most of the calculations created inside of QUBE for use in a regular pivot table and only contain hold periods, these data models are aggregated by day so you can get actual to date measures and comparisons. The first tab shows you an example of a calendar specific measure, which allows you to have disparate time period buckets side by side, which is obviously important in financial reporting. If we look at another tab called P&L by year, you can see that this is a pattern measure. So we have the years side by side, and then I can drill down to get the months side by side. Another way we know that this is a calendar pattern measure is because we have the calendar icon affixed to the label. How we drill down is addressed in the hierarchy. And if you look at the list here, we've created a multitude of hierarchies for you for whatever your needs are. And last but not least is the handling of hierarchies for financial statements. So that means whenever you drill down or drill up, you're never going to have any blank holes sitting in front of you. This takes two parts. First, we provide hierarchies for you for your accounts. And you'll see that there are 10 levels for profit and loss and there are 11 levels for balance sheet. So that handles the first part. And then the second part is actually involved in the DAX measure. So if we go to the list of measures that are here, you'll see that we have two pieces. One is raw without the hierarchy, and then we have formulas that handle the hierarchy automatically. So this hierarchy actual is actually used within a DAX P measure, right, the hidden measure, and then that in turn is used inside one of these calendar pattern measures. So there are three stages to that. If you want to learn more about our methodologies, please visit the URL listed on this page. You will find everything thoroughly documented. This concludes our video about the 5,700 DAX measures included in QUBE for QuickBooks for Power Pivot and Power BI.